Morning from Orlando. I hope that you can hear me through my. I hope that you can hear me. I've got my. Now that I. Let me just take a look at. Connected my Galaxy Buds. So hopefully. Hopefully that'll make somewhat of a difference. We'll see once I replay this. But we are at the Florida Mall in South Orlando. One of the few live indoor malls that you will find in America. A an example of life in the latter quarter of the 20th century, adapted for modern tastes, at least as well as they have perceived. Florida Mall was opened in 1986. It looked somewhat different from what it was. Current perspective right now is at the front. To the left of that is one of the is a former anchor that back in 2014 they converted into kind of an outdoor area. They've got a couple they got a couple extra stores there. I'll explain to you what that used to be. That used to be an anchor. And right here is the dining pavilion. Around 2015, I believe it was, this was opened, and this actually also used to be an anchor. All the anchors here were two-story anchors. And well, I think the one that actually no, I think it was no, this one is the one that was originally a one-story anchor, and at some point a later tenant upgraded it to a two-story. But when the last tenant in this anchor, Lord & Taylor, left in 2014, the entire anchor was gutted and it was converted into this food pavilion. Now, it is officially open at 11 on Sunday, but people have to get into work in the various stores, so it opens much earlier, and people are allowed to walk around here. As long as you don't try to get into any closed stores that you're not authorized to be in. They don't care if people who don't work here are just tooling around the mall. So stuff. Cantina Katrina, that was actually open. That was actually scheduled to open right when they were starting to put it in around when the pandemic began, and as a result, its opening was somewhat delayed mainly because of how slow construction has gotten in recent years. Before this was, I believe this was titled La Madeleine. It was kind of a French kind of lunch brunch type space. And this actually used to be this particular restaurant used to be an Italian spot. Now this one, Amazonica, this used to be Carlo's Bakery. And that was one of the original spots of the dining pavilion when it opened. And they just suddenly disappeared. I think it was early last year when they disappeared. Excuse me. Now, this when it was originally opened, this was actually Ron John's Surf Shop. It eventually left. Ron John's Surf Shop had several spots in Orlando. Their original Orlando store was actually at Festival Bay, what is now Deezerland Orlando. I'll I'll definitely have to tool around there at some point. It's a mall. It's now kind of a weird. It's now kind of a weird amusement place. It also still has its original Bass Pro Shop and its original theater, but I digress. Anyway, this was originally. Oh, there, Riley. Hello there, Clarity. I'm only scratching the surface here. I'll show you a bunch of stuff here. I mean, as I said, this is the dining pavilion here at the Florida Mall. This was originally Ron John's Surf Shop. That was kind of a picture taking place, and then at some point we originally had a Forever 21 over in another former anchor. It actually moved into this spot, and then it closed at the beginning of last year. So, as I said, this area is actually the dining pavilion. This dining pavilion was opened in 2015, and it replaced another food court that was eventually infilled for more stores. Let's see here. See here, we've got Tobu, we got Teriyaki Grill, we've got Nature's Table, which is one of the original restaurants from this area. This Cilantro Taco Grill, this actually replaced the Taco Bell, and it just opened, and this is the first time I've seen it open. Sbarro is one of the original ones. Burger King opened last year, I think. That I don't remember what was originally there. Charlie's was Charlie's moved from the original food court. That Gallo Pinto, that's been a few different places. At one point it was kind of a satellite eatery based on a bakery that's actually elsewhere in the mall currently. And it was and when this dining pavilion opened, it was originally a Subway. Here there is not a Lego store. We actually have a Crayola, and I will show you that as well. Asian Chow moved in from the original food court. Popeyes, that was originally an A&W. Popeyes opened a couple of years ago. And then there's Mizon. Mizon is a fairly big thing here in Florida, and this was also original to this particular food pavilion. U Green, which is a pretty good place for salads and also for smoothies. And the Five Guys here was also open for this. None of the satellite places here are original to this. They've kind of had some churn over recent years, but currently we have Sushi Q. I think Sushi Q is actually owned by the same people who do U Green. And we also actually no, not U Green, Mizon. And Fat Tuesday opened this year. Zuru Ramen, which has an anime theme, has been open for a few years. It's probably the longest running of these little satellite shops that are around the food pavilion. But now we are actually going. By the way, the reason this is this is act we don't this is Sunday. It doesn't actually open until 11. And I actually showed that when I first entered here, but the mall doesn't actually open until 11. So we're still like 2.5 hours away from it really kicking. But as I noted when I first entered, they allow people to come in as long as you don't try to get into any of the actual stores. But this is a live active mall. And there are various stores that they're getting ready to open for the day. They'll start to open. These stores will start to open at 11 a.m. on Sunday, and a few of them won't open until noon. Anyway, here we've got Box Lunch. about middle of last year, you'll see that approximately this seam here, this only used to be like the left 2/3 of this section. They actually expanded and they actually opened that this year. And no, I did not sneak in this there. The mall is open because people actually have to get into their stores in order to, and they allow people who don't to walk around the mall as long as you don't try to get into any places that you're not supposed to be. Essentially, anything that's actually locked or even gated. Both in the food pavilion and here, they've got displays for a new Volkswagen dealership that opened outside the Florida Mall. Anyway, I'm going to come back from this direction, but I'm actually going to head in this direction. Now, back in the 80s, this was just these two areas were just walls. This is where the mall stopped in this side. Around 1992, I believe it was early 90s. They opened a they opened a Dillard's here and they opened a Dillard's here. Both of them were one story. At some point, I think later in the 90s, they actually expanded this one first and they replaced the original Dillard's that was here with a two-story Dillard's. And eventually this one was kind of demolished. And then in the year 2000, they expanded this entire area. They put in a long hall here and a long hall going out from by Dillard's and put in a couple more anchors. And I'll show you as we go through this way. Huh, this Lindt chocolatier is new. I mean brand new. I was last here like a couple weeks ago. Anyway, we've got Hollister here. Hollister also had another store where just past this, going down this way, just past this junction, where the Capital One Cafe was, where the Capital One Cafe is now. Then we've got Steps. This Steps used to be a Skechers store, but it disappeared early last year, I believe it was. This polo store back in the 90s, this was actually a Lane Bryant, which was plus size women's clothing. Lovisa has been in this location for a couple of years. That luggage store used to be an electronics boutique, and that Foot Locker used to be a kids Foot Locker. Now there's just two different Foot Locker stores. It is way too early for me to go into any of the anchors, so I won't actually be going into any of the anchors. I probably wouldn't be doing that under normal circumstances anyway. But at some point, I do want to go into the Sears anchor. And I want to show that off eventually. Anyway, we've got an escape room place here called Game Over. It's kind of interesting. It opened for Halloween, I think 3 years ago. And then after they did that, it was closed, not like erased, but just shut down for almost the entirety of the next year. It didn't open until the next Halloween, and it's been open since then. This Emmanuel used to be Bath and Body Works, but is not. But Bath and Body Works has moved to the other side of the mall, and you'll see that here in a little while. Hello there, Harperific, as well as plushie lovers. We got Corpo Bonito. A lot of these stores, generally, even though this is a live mall and Simon Property Group has done its best to keep it up, in general, there tends to be a lot of churn with individual stores. This Shoe Palace, it used to be a Champ Sports, but Champ Sports was moved to the front of the mall when they moved the dining pavilion away from the front of the mall. And I'll show you where that used to be. This Cotton On was actually opened a couple years ago. Now, when they opened this section of the mall back in 2000, there were a couple anchors and a few other major locations. One of them is this Charlotte Russe. This particular store goes all the way through the middle section of this wing of the mall. So it will open up on the other side by the Apple store. And I'll show you that as we come back around. And across from that is Old Navy. Now, this Express used to be just that section, but shortly after the pandemic, the Old Navy cut its size in half, and half of it was actually encroached upon by Express. And the Express has been there ever since. This Abercrombie Kids used to just be Abercrombie and Fitch. Then we've got the Children's Place. There used to be a Gymboree down the hall that we came from, but eventually it closed. It originally folded into the Children's Place, and there was a little Gymboree sign attached to this, but eventually they got rid of that too. And we also have Build-A-Bear Workshop. This opened with this section. There's not a lot of stores here that are original. There are like 2 or 3 different Lids Sports Hatch stores. This particular one only opened, I think, last year. And then there's American Eagle Outfitters and Vans. Those are both original to this section. Now, we'll get to Macy's in a sec, but first we're heading down this section. We've got Pro Image Kids here. This was originally kind of a wine store only a few years ago. Now, this particular anchor, as we come up, you'll also see the Crayola Experience. These two things used to be Nordstrom. They were opened in 2000 as a Nordstrom when this whole section opened. But eventually, when Nordstrom went out of business, they closed this particular store. They actually split it up. Half of it became an attraction called the Crayola Experience. I actually knew someone who used to work at the Crayola Experience. The other half became Dick's Sporting Goods. This is the Florida Mall in Orlando. I am currently going through here in pre hour. A lot of the stores that are in here are definitely not original. In fact, I don't think there's anything that's original in this particular wing. I think the only thing that is original, because there is an exit out here. The only thing that's original in this wing is the Buca di Beppo restaurant, which is the family style Italian restaurant. There's actually a store here behind this cotton candy machine. This and this used to be this and this originally was an eyeglass store. Eventually, they split this off. This particular this particular anime store, it was originally Gotcha. At some point, Gotcha decided to move into there, but they kept this open for a few months, and they only had gotcha machine. They only had claw machines that had snacks in them for a long time. But eventually, I ended up tripping over one of the things in this particular kids' play area. But eventually, they closed it and they turned it into one of those anime shops. And we've got kind of a little arcade here. Is what is called Game Park. We've got two of them here, and there's going to be a third eventually. We'll get to those on the other side of the mall. But anyway, this is the current Gotcha store. But now we are walking around to the southeast end of the mall and toward the Macy's. Now, when this section of the mall originally opened, this particular anchor we're going to be coming up on was originally Burdines, which was a major department store specifically in Florida. Only a few years after this section opened, Burdines was acquired by Macy's. And for a little while, it was actually named Burdines Macy's. But eventually they cut off the Burdines name. And it's just been Macy's ever since. This area is we're currently so early that it'll probably be another 20 minutes, but usually this particular anchor opens early, but they actually cordon off most of the entrance because just inside on the right side is a Starbucks. Anyway, we've got an entrance here. This particular corner store was originally called Charming Charlie. And to this day, they still have the double C door handles that came with that particular store. Now, this is going to be an interesting location. It is currently called Fever Hub, but from the opening of this mall until a few years ago, this was originally an M&M's World store. Eventually, they decided to move to Disney Springs. And it's been a couple placeholder things, and now it's kind of a mini expedition hub. There is currently a Titanic exhibit here, and I think there's a couple other things like this glow or go. Don't know what that particular thing is for. I haven't seen that one yet. The original the original bordering that they had over this for most of last year only suggested that the Titanic exhibit was going to be here, but it seems that this is going to be a more general but it seems that this is a more general exhibition space. There's not much here that is original from when they opened this particular wing back in 2000. One of the ones that is original is Sephora. Now, this Mimic store, I don't know what this one was originally, but at one point they decided to put a Microsoft store in here, but it didn't survive the pandemic. After that, it was replaced by the North Face, and that one closed a couple of years ago. There were some other placeholders, but currently it is a store for Mimic. I think Coach and White House Black Market are both originals. And as I said, over here is the pass through for the Charlotte Russe I showed you on the other side. And opposite that, the Apple Store. That Apple Store, I believe, has been here since this section opened. Anyway, got a couple other places. Now, this T-Mobile store is kind of interesting. Over by that box lunch that I showed you earlier, there was originally a Sprint store when the food pavilion opened. Not long after that, T-Mobile opened over here. Eventually, they merged. And not long ago, that original Sprint store, which was turned into a T-Mobile store itself, was closed off. And last year, they actually expanded this T-Mobile. This left section of T-Mobile originally wasn't there. Hello there, Tiggy Jr. But they expanded late last year. Now we are about to turn to the west and head for the center of the Florida Mall. Got a couple Italian. We've got an ice cream gelato store here, Luciano's, as well as a couple Italian clothing spots, Calzedonia and Intimissimi. And now there are 3 different Auntie Anne's locations in the Florida Mall. 2 of them have been here ever since the opening. among the few things that are original to the Florida Mall. I'm not sure Victoria's Secret was here before the 90s. This this section of Adidas, this used to be the Sharper Image. And this, of course, I don't know what Capital One is doing with this particular section that's still walled off, but this is the Capital One Cafe. This used to be the original Hollister when this section was originally opened. But they decided to turn it into kind of a cafe. It's kind of a low-key bank location. This garage used to be the Disney store, but the Disney store closed like 5 years ago. I think it closed. I don't know if it closed before or after the pandemic, or maybe they're planning on closing it before the pandemic happened. Victoria's Secret, as I said, I'm not sure if Victoria's Secret was here before the 90s, but Armani Exchange. Now, this particular store, Tennis, this was originally a Mayor's jewelry store, and that closed all of a sudden last year. It was one of the original. It was one of the original stores. It was one of the few remaining original stores. And of course, Steve Madden opened recently. Razor's been open for a couple years. Now, this center store here, it was opened in the early 90s. At one point, the entire thing was a Warner Brothers Studios store, but it was split off early 2000s. There were various things in both sides. At one point, the opposite side was actually a candy store. But now one side is Mac, is a cosmetic store. The other side is actually a couple extra is actually a couple extra food stalls, and I'll show you that here shortly. And of course, we have Miniso. I forgot all the things that have been in this particular spot. There's actually a satellite shopping center outside of here that has a Miniso in it as well. That predates this particular section. Now, this VJ Diamond, well, I'm actually looking at Florsheim right now, but this VJ Diamond, this was originally Sanrio. This was originally a Sanrio gate store. And I remember growing up going in here often, but all you have are the various anime stores where you can get that kind of stuff. Like, for example, there's a lot of that in Miniso. Here in this corner, we have United World Soccer. This particular store has been open for more than 15 years. They opened it right before we got Orlando City, when its original minor league version back in 2011. At some point right before the pandemic, they tried to move it into the spot where Game Over is now by Dillard's, but after the pandemic, they moved back here. I think they're getting ready for I think they're getting ready for the new season. Actually, I don't know what they're doing. In fact, I want to take another look at the other side. Because, yeah, this was open recently. I think they may have finally closed it. Yeah, I think they might. Yeah, I think they may have actually closed United World Soccer. If they did that, that was recent because last time I was here, it was active. Now, back there is the Florida Hotel. It's got a star. The Starbucks actually opened recently. The Chick-fil-A opened a couple years ago. That Florida hotel was I don't know who operates it. If it could just be operated by Simon, but originally it was a Sheraton, and at some point it was also an Adams Mark. But eventually it just became kind of its own thing, and it's just but it's always been a hotel. Prior to the pandemic, you could actually enter the mall through the hotel, but now, in order to enter the hotel, you actually have to be staying at the hotel. They don't allow you to just pass through. Anyway, this is the newer Bath and Body Works here. I'll come back and show off some of the stuff that's on the other side. Guess is an original store here. Mango, I think, only opened a couple years ago. But the Gap is definitely one of the original stores. This has been here since 1986, and at some point, it actually went all the way here. It was like, you got Gap, you got Gap Kids. This used to be Baby Gap, but Baby Gap was eventually consolidated into Gap Kids. Now, this Zumi store, this used to be Peaches Records. This used to be an actual record store. That's what it originally opened at when the mall opened as when the mall opened. This lens crafters, I'm fairly sure it was originally Pearl Vision. And this is the other Auntie Anne's. Now, this candy store, Sugar Planet, until the year before last, this was actually one of the original stores, 579, which was a girls' focus clothing store. And down here, Sears. This is one of the 5 remaining Sears stores in existence. And it's only partially that. Because since early last year, part of the Sears has been being redeveloped as a round one, an amusement an, an amusement place, essentially an arcade that is a lot like Dave and Buster's, except in normal cases, round one doesn't have the actual restaurant. Although this one, the round one that they're going to be put in at least some of this space is going to have a concept called Round One Delicious, which is going to include an actual restaurant. Now, I've heard that that the round one may have been delayed, and I'm also not sure just how much of the Sears is going to be redeveloped as the round one. But the original claim by Sears was that was that the Sears would remain here in a smaller footprint. It looks like they're going to be using more toward the west side of this anchor, but we'll see how this goes. This was originally a Petland, a pet and pet supply store. Then recently it was kind of a sporting goods store. Now it's just sitting here. This used to be one of the stores for a local tattoo spot called Atomic Tattoos. They decided to move this location to another place, and someone else came in right behind them and took it over. There's a bunch of different hair shows. There's a bunch of different hair shops here. Churromania's been here for a little while. There's also a lot of massage parlors. Now, there's been a lot of churn in this area, but there are a couple things that are still original. The Claire's and the Sunglass Hut are original. We'll come back around here. This Haagen-Dazs. This just opened. It was originally a Mrs. Fields Cookies, and then it became a Cold Stone Creamery, and that was replaced by Ben and Jerry's, and last year was taken over by Haagen-Dazs. And of course, they have a little satellite shop in the dining pavilion. This Aphonics store used to be a Babbage's, used to be another electronics store. Although when Babbage's and Electronics Boutique and GameStop all merged, it became a GameStop. And at that point, we had two different GameStop stores. Although currently we're down to one. And I don't know if that's going to stick around because that's currently in some flux. This Vertini used to be this was originally everything but water, a kind of a swim store. Kind of a swimwear store. And it was a sporting goods store for a little while, but now it's just a high men's fashion area. This Akira, this used to be Walden Books. I knew it was a bookstore when it originally opened. I just need to remember which bookstore it is. In that time, it was either Walden Books or it was B. Dalton. And here they had Walden Books. I don't think there were very many B. Daltons in the Orlando area. Could have sworn there was at least one, but if there were the now this Fun Factory is our other arcade. It opened very recently. This was originally an Eckerd drugstore. Then, when it was acquired by CVS, it became CVS. Eventually, they closed the pharmacy part of it, and eventually they closed the rest of it. And it's until Fun Factory, it was just a fill-in spot for various stores that were relocating in store locations. And of course, we have the J.C. Penney. This is one of the original anchors. At one point, they actually expanded J.C. Penney further out to the west. They increased its size on both levels by about 30%, and it's just kind of been hanging out ever since. In fact, I think they actually merged. Yeah, they actually merged Forever 21 into J.C. Penney. I think they acquired the Forever 21 brand when that particular store went out of business. this space battle. This has been open for a few years. This particular spot was originally Lionel. Actually, no, it was not Lionel Playworld. I know it was some sort of. For a long time, it was various kid stores, and this Lavmoda. This used to be an American Greetings. I believe it was originally called Squiggles and Giggles when it was owned by American Greetings. It eventually dropped that name, just became American Greetings. Then it just went through various identities. This pop cola actually used to be at the front. They moved into this section a few years ago. But coming up here is one of the original stores, Spencer Gifts. Spencer is one of the original stores of the Florida Mall. It's been here ever since. Hasn't really moved. I think they recently redid the main part, because what they do with this is this gate, and this is the way it's always been. They raised this, and this essentially became the store's sign. And that's the way it's always been. This used to be an electronics store, and it kind of went around the corner out here, but it eventually became a smoke outlet. This Claire's is one of the originals. Now, Fortuna Bakery. If you were standing here as I am right now, you would be actually smelling baked goods, because this is an active bakery, and this is a fairly well trafficked store here, selling various baked goods with kind of a Hispanic flair here. And this is also a little shop as well. And of course, we got the Bellagio Jewelers. That's been a few different repair places ever since they opened. I forgot what they replaced the original Forever 21 with. I'm not actually going to come out here. I don't even think I can. I think it is open. Well, it's open, but it's not really pre-marked. That's what they call it. I don't know what the store actually is, but there is also the original All-American Girl and H&M. Those were open about 2014, when this anchor was actually demolished and replaced with these two rows of stores here. This was actually one of the last anchors that was opened. It was originally a Robinson's. It was opened a few months after the rest of the mall was, in later 1986. It was replaced by Maison Blanche, and then later by Gaffer's, and eventually, once those stores left, they decided to completely reimagine this area and turn into kind of a partial outdoor kind of place. But there is an actual indoor entrance for the H&M. Yes, welcome Eves Bretts 154. I am in Orlando, in the United States, state of Florida. This is the Florida Mall. Anyway, we're gonna come down Not too much left to show with this, but we're going to come around to the actual front of the mall. They're actually starting to play the music now. Okay, this is one of the Lid sports hat stores. This Hot Topic used to be at the front as well, but eventually moved in here. There is nothing original down this section. We've got Steps New York. We've got Predire, which is kind of a cosmetic store. We've got another Journeys. This Cotton On Kids used to be just this girls' shop. They've got Torrid, which is the current ladies plus size area store, that is. Right here we've got Crepe Delicious, which opened not long after the pandemic. Of course, they have sweet and savory crepes here, as well as an ice cream / gelato area. We've got a Levi's store that opened a couple years ago. Perfumania is one of the very few remaining original stores, just like Spencer, as I showed you a little bit. Actually, Levi's used to be Things Remember, which was another of our original stores that actually closed early in 2024. And when that closed, people were shocked that it happened. Now, this Uniqlo and this Juan Valdez, this was originally an entrance to the original food court, and it kind of came around to the front. And where Uniqlo is, this was originally a Barney's Coffee. Eventually that was acquired by Starbucks. But they closed all this off when they moved the original food court to the current food pavilion. And of course, part of this was also the original Lids. And of course, we got K Juniors. I think K Jewelers. This is in its original location. Now we are going to the actual front of the mall. That Journeys used to be Morrison's Cafeteria. When this place opened, that was an actual buffet-style restaurant. And there were no stores in this area where Kids Foot Locker and Champ Sports currently is. This used to be the other end of that food court. And originally, they had a Subway, they had a Taco Bell, they had a Chick-fil-A. Back when they were originally exclusively in malls, they had Orange Julius. Yes, they had Nature's Table. They had all sorts of. They also had Corn Dog on a Stick. They had that one. I think there's only a few of those. I think I've seen those on occasion, but those are definitely dying. This Champ Sports, that's the one I mentioned, was originally by Dillard's in the west wing of the mall that they opened in 2000. This JD, before the pandemic, it was For Your Entertainment. And before that, This was actually an arcade. And of course, this is the remaining GameStop. Let's take a look here. I don't think I've heard anything about this being one of the GameStops that they are planning on closing. But I just want to take a quick look. Yeah, there's nothing here suggesting that this is one of the GameStops that they're going to be closing. Now, this particular Foot Locker has always been here, but it's eventually expanded both this way and out that way as well. Originally, it didn't have an external opening of its own, but it does now. Now, this Shake Shack, this was originally a Ruby Tuesday. It closed about around the time the Food Pavilion opened, and eventually it reopened as a Shake Shack. Now, I'm going to be quite honest. I personally think that Shake Shack is better quality for the price than Five Guys. Personally, I think that Five Guys is not that great a burger, and to be honest, is too expensive to be not a great burger. I don't think their fries are that special, and personally, I think you can find better milkshakes at McDonald's. Take that for what you will. If you're gonna get a good sit down, if you're gonna get a good sit down burger, I would definitely choose Shake Shack over Five Guys. But we are going to go ahead and head back down to the Food Pavilion, where we are going to end this little live stream. Can't believe I've been on for nearly an hour. Usually if I weren't actually stopping and explaining a lot of things, then I could walk around this mall in about 35 minutes. As I said, on Sundays, the Florida Mall doesn't officially open until 11. Every other day, it officially opens at 10. But it actually does soft open much earlier, and people are allowed to be in here as long as you don't try to get into any of the stores that are locked if you're not supposed to be in there. As I said, we've got the original Victoria's Secret. This was remodeled recently. I don't remember seeing the Victoria's Secret before the 90s, but it's been a fixture here ever since. And one last look at the Auntie Anne's. And one last look at the Orlando Volkswagen South ad display. This later act was originally a different chocolatier, but they switched to a different one a couple of years ago. And this is a little satellite for Amazonica here. All right. Things are replaced so fast that it's hard to remember what was in certain store spots. And of course, you got Gotcha Smokehouse, which opened with the dining pavilion back in 2015. Well, I'm going to go ahead and head outside here and finish this up. Anyone who's been who's been watching with me, I thank you very much for giving me your time as I show you around the Florida Mall here in Orlando, one of the remaining enclosed malls that you will find. Certainly one of the remaining ones that is active and regularly kept up, with the exception of Sears, but that will change. I wish I were in on what exactly they were doing with Sears and with the round one that it's going to be moving in slash potentially replacing it. The original plan was for it to be open in 2026. I've heard it might be delayed into 2027. A lot of stores have the viral ice cream. But let's go ahead and head out. Which currently can be located there at twitch.tv/Maxen. That's MACSEN. And you can also find me on X, and that is. And I thank everyone for watching, and I will see you later.